And you know what time it is? It's time for KP's Video News. KP's Video News, y'all. KP's Video News, y'all. KP's Video News, y'all. Right. KP's.
That's right, it's time for KP's Video News, y'all. And we're going to get real busy today because I got a lot of stories. And I'm going to try to dive right on in. And this first one kind of caught me off guard because I was telling the story last week about how a young lady that was on a TV show called Bad Girls Club had got shot and killed in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And it's like, wow, man. So now this new story comes out about Pharrell Williams says his cousin was shot and killed by the police during Virginia Beach violence. And so his cousin, Donovan Lynch, 25 years old, was killed by police during a chaotic night of violence in Virginia Beach last Friday. And police said there were 3 shootings, 2 people, Virginia Beach resident Lynch and 29-year-old Deshayla Harris, the girl from the Bad Girls Club, were killed and 8 injured. The loss of these lives is a tragedy beyond measure, Williams wrote. My cousin Donovan was killed during the shootings. He was a bright light and someone who always showed up for others. It's critical to his family and other victims' families get transparency, honesty, and justice they deserve. Virginia Beach is an epitome of hope and tenacity. And as a community, we will get through this and come out even stronger. And Virginia Beach Police Department police chief stated Saturday he believes Harris was an innocent victim that was probably struck by stray gunfire in some regards. He said Lynch, however, was killed during a police intervention shooting. In a statement, police said 2 officers present stated Lynch was brandishing a handgun at the time of the shooting. An independent witness confirmed that Mr. Lynch had been in possession of a handgun earlier on the evening of March 26th. The department said it, and which also included photos of the weapons reported after the shooting. And the responding officers did not have on their body cameras. The protesters gathered over the weekend, and some disputed the report that Lynch was armed. The Virginia Beach NAACP stated Monday, said it was distressed to hear about the deaths of Lynch and Harris, and we are not surprised of the revelation that body camera of the officer involved in the death of Mr. Lynch was not activated, it said. Disciplinary actions surrounding an officer misconduct shall not be withheld from the public under its pretext it's a personal issue. This has been the case in the past. Transparency of police disciplinary is required now. The organization accused the police department of failing on all accounts. The $5.5 million implementation and investment on body-worn cameras is worthless when the officers do not turn the cameras on for recording. And a statement from Karen Hills, the president of the chapter, reads, Mr. Lynch is not here to tell his side. The officer involved has no reason to be forthcoming about any facts that places him in an adverse light. The NAACP calls for a citizens review board with full investigative and subpoena powers, and want police officers who use deadly force to be reviewed by a statewide board tied to officer recertification credentials. On Monday, the Virginia Beach Police Department said that once the criminal investigation is complete, all statements and evidence will be submitted to the Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney which is conducting a separate investigation in the incident and independent of the police department. Jay Jones, a delegate for the Norfolk area in Virginia's House of Delegates, stated, and he called for investigation by the state's attorney general into the shooting death. We need far better accountability and transparency, and the families of those killed by police in Virginia Beach and across this country deserve answers. Lynch was a student athlete at the University of Virginia's College at Wise and played an offensive lineman on the football team in 2017 and 2018. And Williams is from Virginia Beach and organizes the Something in the Water Music Festival, which is held in 2019 and canceled in 2020 because of the coronavirus pandemic. And the festival's website say they're planning to hold another one in 2022. Anyway, another shooting and another situation where you have cops that have turned off their cameras or they never turned them on in the first place. And what's the point? Like I said, they spent $5.5 million for these cameras for these officers in that particular jurisdiction, and they're not even using them. They're not even using them. So it's like, what's the point in them having them if they're not turning them on? And it seems like they should be automatically turned on. Okay, here's a situation that says cops involved in George Floyd's death. As we know, the George Floyd Chauvin trial is going on right now in Minnesota. And it said cops involved in the George Floyd death allegedly roughly detained another black man weeks before George Floyd got killed. 3 police officers connected to George Floyd's death allegedly roughly detained another black man just weeks before, as new footage has shown. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who leaned on Floyd's neck, has been charged with second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter, with prosecutors recently granted permission to pursue a third-degree murder charge. Thomas Lane, Alexander Kung have also been charged with aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. Along with Chauvin, they've now been accused of roughly detaining another black man weeks before Floyd's death. Tao, another attending officer with the same charges, wasn't involved in this incident. The 3 officers, along with Luis Relavesquez, arrived at a South Minnesota's apartment building where a woman was reportedly being held hostage. As they entered the building, a man named Adrian Drakeford walked out. When officers mistakenly thought he had a knife, they tackled him to the ground and detained him. Meanwhile, his brother Lee asked for their badge numbers, while the girlfriend, Camaria Layton, shouted he didn't do anything. They have pictures of that, and the 27-year-old wasn't connected to the 911 call, and he didn't have any weapon whatsoever. Nevertheless, he was detained along with his brother Terrence, who took issue at how the police was treating Adrian. Lee walked away before he could be detained, and the other officers never found the caller or alleged victim. Adrian was released without any charges, and the Minneapolis city attorney dropped any obstruction or legal process charges against Terrence in the interest of justice, so-called justice. The officers wrote in a report, this whole call was unfounded because everyone on the scene at this address was uncooperative. Andrew Gordon, who represented Terrence as part of the nonprofit Legal Rights Center, told the publication, the timeline here is troubling. The same officers are involved in the murder of George Floyd using some of the same techniques and the need and the desire to control people. He added, this is not the first decision point where someone could have done something, and this was maybe the last one. Wow. Same cops that involved in the George Floyd situation a couple of weeks before allegedly did the same thing to somebody else. Only difference was it was other people that were there on the scene, and they, didn't get a chance to go too far with it. So the other day I was talking about a case where they had a black police officer in St. Louis that was allegedly brutalized and beat up. He was undercover during a protest, and white cops, beat him down. Anyway, this I'm letting you know how these cases be going, and I'm letting you know that basically even a black cop can't get justice. So this is an all-white jury, returns no convictions for the officers who allegedly brutalized the black veteran detective. There would be no convictions for St. Louis Metro Police Officer Stephen Corte and former St. Louis officers Christopher Myers and Dustin Boone. The three men were charged with depriving 22-year veteran Detective Luther Hall of his civil rights under the color of law, which carry a maximum sentence of 10 years. Court wrote also faced charges of lying to the FBI, and Myers had an additional charge of destroying evidence stemming from allegedly intentionally destroying Hall's cell phone. The three men were on trial for beating of a fellow officer who was black while he was working undercover during the Black Lives Matter protest in 2017. The all-white jury took 2 days to deliberate and clear court of all charges. The jury also acquitted Myers of the most serious charge of deprivation of Hall's rights, but a mistrial was concluded over the destruction of property charge. The jury could not agree on the two charges against Boone, also resulted in a mistrial. This means that Officer Court is free and clear, while the other two men could be prosecuted for their mistrial charges if prosecutors decide to go ahead and retry them. During the Black Lives Matter protest in December 2017, Detective Hall was working undercover when he was attacked by St. Louis police officers, later identified through photography and witness accounts. They were identified by former Officer Hayes during an investigation as being someone who kicked Hall in the back of the head. The officers were indicted in 2018 of charges, deprivation, and as you see, all-white jury. This, of course, is magnified when everyone else is a black citizen, or in this case, a 22-year veteran police officer who happens to be black. They are citizens in our country, frequently black and brown, convicted off the testimony of guilty pleading, equally unreliable witnesses. It is the foundation of the most prosecution strategies. The defense team was able to successfully manipulate the jury to exclude people of color over the objections of the prosecutors and a judge who felt compelled to put at least one black alternate juror back in the pool, meaning that the jury remained all white. And this is in St. Louis, Missouri, which is a city that is more than 45% black, and they didn't have not one black juror on the trial. So, oh man, I'm telling you, man. Yep. So even the Ethical Society of Police that represents police of color in St. Louis stated that the decision of the jury, they respect the decision of the jury, but they strongly disagree with the verdict. It said in the statement there was clear evidence to convict St. Louis police officers Myers, Boone, and Court. The injuries Detective Luther Hall sustained were consistent with being beaten by multiple suspects. Police officers continue to escape the consequences of their actions, and the criminal justice system continues to show African American victims of police violence we do not receive the same level of justice when white police officers are accused of excessive force toward African Americans. Now, this was the Ethical Society of Police that represents officers of color. That was their statement. I'm telling you, man. It is our hope to now obtain all relevant evidence from the FBI to conduct a complete and thorough internal investigation. And so, it's like telling you, man, the situation, man, that's where we living today. That's where we living today. And this is another one that went all the way to a whole different level. And this is so you got a racist that was slapped with a $5,000 fine after threatening to set black family on fire. You heard me right. A New Hampshire man has been fined $5,000 for yelling racial slurs at a black family and threatening to spray them with gasoline from a gas station pump and set them on fire. On July 29th of 2020, police say John Doran, 62 years old, confronted a black family from out of town who stopped at a gas station, shouting, "Go back to Africa, you're not getting any gas here." When one of the family members exited the vehicles in response, Doran began to issue threats. During this interaction, the defendant brandished the gas nozzle at the victim and threatened to spray the victim with gasoline. The defendant told the victim to back up before he burns him, fear for his safety, and believed that the defendant intended to harm him. When leaving the gas station, Doran continued to shout, "F you, wait till I get back, you better not be here." And Rockingham County Superior Court judge on Monday ruled that Doran had violated a New Hampshire Civil Rights Act. The court concluded that this conduct was motivated by animus toward the victim's race and had the purpose to terrorize or coerce the victim and the victim's family. The New Hampshire Department of Justice explained in the news release. So this guy ends up getting a $5,000 fine. He should have been locked up in jail for at least a year and a half for making a terrorist threat. So, and this here's the last story here. You got a crooked ex-cop that sent as many as 4 innocent men behind bars. Now he got to go to jail himself. And a corrupt former Louisville homicide detective, Mark Handy, who helped send as many as 4 innocent men to prison, will now spend 1 year there himself. Handy has agreed to plead guilty to perjury and tampering with physical evidence in a deal which he has promised not to seek probation. He signed the deal Monday, though it must be approved by April 5th by the Jefferson Circuit judge. And Handy agreed to plead guilty last August in a deal that would have given him probation, but Stevens rejected that as being too lenient. Stevens said probation would have depreciated the seriousness of Handy's offense against Erwin Chandler, who was wrongfully convicted 25 years ago and spent 10 years behind bars before he was exonerated. The city paid Chandler an $8.5 million settlement after his lawyers showed Handy fed Chandler facts to use in his confession and taped over surveillance video that might have pointed to the real killer. Both Commonwealth and defense argued for probation, saying Handy's guilty plea to the felony would have made him ineligible to serve in law enforcement. And, he still shouldn't be able to serve. But a passionate letter to the Judge Stevens last month, County Attorney Michael Connell said Handy committed a grave human rights violation and probation would have been manifestly against the public interest. Stevens called Handy's crime a breach of public trust and said he wanted to ensure the public didn't think Handy was being treated differently because he was a police officer. The tampering charges stemmed from Handy's misconduct in the manslaughter convictions of Keith West, and Handy admits he taped over the recording of a witness's statement in the West case according to the plea agreement. Last year, Stevens refused to overturn West's 2 1997 manslaughter convictions, but former Governor Matt Bevin pardoned them. Detective Denny Butler recommended in 2009 that Handy be prosecuted for perjury, but Commonwealth Attorney Tom Wine said there wasn't enough evidence to win a conviction, and the Metro Council in 2018 voted to ask Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear to appoint a special prosecutor, and he assigned Shane Young, the Hardin County Commonwealth's attorney, to the case. 2 months later, the grand jury indicted Handy. Young said it took him only 4 hours to decide Handy should be charged, and said he has asked the U.S. Justice Department to investigate why he wasn't prosecuted earlier. And so, hey, that's the way it goes, man, in the land of no-nos. Yep, that is the way it goes, folks. So these stories here, this is what's going on in America today pertaining to you. Kpvideonews, y'all. Peace.